Hi guys, and welcome to this episode of the Full Out Cheer podcast. I'm Danielle, and I am your host for today. Guys, I have got a really good topic for today because I'm in the Crazy Moms of Cheer group. Now, don't kick me out. I am a cheer mom, both of a high school cheerleader and an all-star cheerleader, but I'm also a gym owner. I wanted to go through a post that was made, by the time you guys listen to this episode, it was made last Friday, but it was made by an anonymous member, and it's called An Open Letter to Cheer Gym Owners. And I want to go through this and just talk about from the owner's perspective, what it looks like to reply to parents in each of these areas. So I'm going to read the introduction and number one, and then I'm going to give you my response in terms of gym owners. Like, what does all this look like from the other side as a gym owner ourselves? An open letter to cheer gym owners. Dear gym owners, we love this sport. We love the discipline, the teamwork, the friendships, and the memories that cheer creates. But right now, many families and athletes are struggling. Not because they've lost their passion, but because the environment around them is becoming too heavy to carry. Number one, the cost is becoming unreachable. When monthly tuition reaches $600 to $700 or more, not including uniforms, travel, choreography, competition fees, cheer is no longer attainable for most middle-class families. This sport was built on passion and community, but it's becoming something only a select few can afford. Families are sacrificing basic needs to keep their kids in a sport they love, and that shouldn't be the price of participation. Cheer shouldn't be a luxury, it should be an opportunity. So I wanted to reply and know that not all gym owners will 100% agree with me, but I want to reply to these from a gym owner's perspective because I think sometimes there are things that parents also don't see. There's a balance when it comes to the cost, right? There is an economic divide. Even in my gym, I have the people that can go on the vacations all the time, that live in the bigger houses, have the newer cars. And then I also have the families who are doing every fundraising event. They're working the extra hours, they're doing the extra jobs and stuff like that so that they can comfortably afford cheer. I would even venture to say that some are doing those things so they can uncomfortably afford cheer. And this is the choice that the two types of parents in the gym make. And of course, the vast majority probably lies somewhere in the middle there. But know that gym owners recognize at times these divides, and we really have to play the balance act. Now, there will be programs that won't play a balance at all. They will say, this is what's entailed with our program. This is the cost. If you can't afford it, we have recreational tumbling or recreational cheer or a novice team. For a lot of gyms, the issue with our budget, most gym owners do budgeting in January, February. I can promise you, because I have worked with gym owners for a really long time doing this, I can promise you the issue is never that owners are saying, well, my profit isn't big enough. The issue is that owners are tallying up the cost of what all of these things entail, and they're saying it's too expensive for my families. How do I cut this back while still providing and meeting that expectation? And know that the expectation for the different divides among customers, the expectation might be different. For those who can't afford it, they may be expecting full bling uniforms, fully custom music, choreography that includes separate stunt camps and choreography fluff. They may be expecting to go to Summit Worlds, All-Star Worlds every year, versus the families that are trying to just afford the sport are like, hey, if we could get less rhinestones, but it cut the cost of the uniform, we'd be fine with that, right? If we didn't travel to cheer sport and NCA and all these other events, we'd be okay with that. And so know that every gym, regardless of D1, D2, because that throughout this letter, there's in the comments, a lot of discussions that have very heavy assumptions about D1 and D2 gyms. Well, D2 gyms are cheaper, is what they say. Not necessarily. It's important to know that it actually doesn't matter whether it's a D1 or a D2 gym. Every gym owner is trying to cater to the economic divide that they see within their gyms. And it's pretty rare that we have gym owners who are not seeing an economic divide. There's also the balancing act that owners play between what they want, like what the customer wants, versus what they want to pay for. I should have paused and said at the beginning of this episode, I think I'm starting to come down with a cold. So if you hear me and I sound like my voice is shaky, I promise none of this is making me cry. If you're listening to this on the podcast, I just am kind of overcoming. I hope I'm overcoming a cold right now, or I'm coming down with one. I guess we'll find out next week. But going back to this, like, what do the people in the gym want? Well, they want the custom music. They want the stunt camps with the best of the best in the industry. They want to be able to have those extra tumbling practices and extra practices whenever the team needs it. They want to be able to have the top coaches in the industry, but do they want to pay the prices for those things? And that's something that we see, like I see this in my gym all the time. People are like, man, it would be so cool if we could get this person out here for a tumbling camp. I'm like, you are totally right. That person is charging right now $5,000 for a one-day tumbling camp. And so even if I broke that into 10 different camps, I can't guarantee that I would be able to get you that camp with a reasonable number of athletes and be able to fill all of those camps. But I can't promise that I would be able to do that and even then support my cost. Because what a lot of parents don't see is, okay, so you probably did the math in your head. It's $5,000. I need to make $500 per clinic and they can take 10 kids. Well, that's $50, right? But what is the cost trade-off for not being able to host birthday parties or private lessons in my gym that day because I have this other person here? Like, the gym themselves have to make money as well so that they can outweigh that opportunity cost. What do people want versus what do people want to pay for is such a tricky thing, because when we do our coffee and conversations every year, which is where I do focus groups in about February with most of my teams, and the parents come in and I ask a series of questions and I sit back and I try to be quiet. I'm not very good at it, but I try to be very quiet and I try to just type the answers that I'm hearing. You know, there is always a divide between those who are saying we want to travel more, we want, the custom this and that, and the group of people saying this sport is at the top of my budget. If it were to get any more expensive or any more demanding, I don't think we'd be able to do it. And that's knowing that I have recreational cheer, novice cheer, prep cheer, and elite. But you guys know as well as I do, it's pretty rare to have people go backwards in that funnel. I had a couple kids this past year, but they were young enough that they didn't really know the difference between, a mini elite team and a mini prep team. But for the most part, once you go to elite, you're probably not going back down to novice or prep. And so if you've hit elite at one point and the price just continues to rise and rise and rise, the idea of going back to prep because it's more affordable, for a lot of people, that's just not an option. And depending on what that skill divide is in your gym, a lot of parents would not necessarily see going backwards as a good fit for their child because they wouldn't be able to utilize the skills they have. Some of this is on the gym owner. And I was talking to Dan Cotton, who runs the Cheer Biz podcast, and we were talking about this because he said, yeah, I'm thinking about doing a podcast on this. And I was like, no, you can't do that. I'm doing one. I'm like about to film it right now. And he was saying, it's so crazy that the tuition is $600 to $700 per month for this person in their gym. And Dan teaches pricing. He wrote a whole book about pricing in the cheer industry. And even he thought that was pretty high. The thing is, we're not seeing what that accounts for. Right? We're not seeing, does that account for individual training for any of these athletes? Does that account for the tumbling being included? Does that account for 8 hours of practice a week? And so we don't really have the facts there. That said, I agree with him. I don't know a gym that charges $600 to $700, but there is always a big pull because you know what your customers want versus what they can afford. There's also a big pull from gym owners to keep up with the Joneses. Right? That team gets new uniforms for Worlds every year and we don't. Maybe we should be getting new uniforms for Worlds because my athletes and my parents in the gym were so impressed by that and were asking questions. That team gets blingier bows. Maybe we should consider blingier bows, which are going to cost more because all of our people are kind of infatuated with that. All of the kids at my gym are going to another gym for a tumbling clinic because they brought in some cheerlebrity. Man, maybe I should be doing those in my gym and bringing all that in-house. There is this constant need to feel like you have to keep up with the Joneses in the industry. And perhaps it's like this in other sports industries, but boy, do you feel it in cheer. So know that your gym owners are trying so hard to make sure that they're budgeting appropriately for everybody in the gym, but they are continuously pulled toward the things that other parents are saying about well, this team does this, or this gym does this, or, we would like a uniform like this. Know also that a large portion of the fees, and this person was really good in their post because they separated, it doesn't include uniform, travel, choreography, this and that. But know that we're a pass-through entity for a lot of people, right? So we're not specifically collecting those competition fees and then only paying half of them. A lot of times we're paying the competition fees and it is like dollar for dollar what we're charging you. Maybe we're charging $5 more a lot of times just so we can cover our credit card fees through, the card fees that you incurred when you made that payment and the card fees that are then passed on to us most of the time by the event producers. There's also things in there like, and maybe this gym owner is accounting for those things not in the fees, but in their tuition. But when your coaches work all week, their normal shift, and then they go to a competition for 12 hours on a Saturday, you have to pay your coaches. You have to pay, if it's a travel event, you have to pay for their meals. If you are requiring your coaches to be at that event, you have to pay for their travel. You have to pay for their hourly time. Perhaps this gym is accounting for those things in the tuition rather than competition fees. But if a parent were to look at, a website and it says the competition fee is $199 per athlete, well, why in the world are you charging me $239 per athlete? Like all of those things, the competition fees are a pass-through, but they don't come at no cost, right? You have those extra expenses that are factored into labor and credit card fees and administrative cost in even getting those kids registered for the competition. I once posted that in a parent group and another parent replied and said, that's the cost of doing business. And I said, absolutely. But in any facet, the cost of doing business has to be passed on to the customer. Like you can't expect a business to lose just because it's the part of doing business. Like, if I go to Walmart, the cost of the credit card fees that they know they're going to incur is in the cost of the product I've purchased. So yes, is it in the cost of doing business? Absolutely. But you're going to see it as the consumer in one place or another. Things like, minimum wage, when it increases, like the people who are working, the employees are like, yeah. And even if they're getting paid more than minimum wage, like they know that if minimum wage increases to $15 an hour and I'm getting paid $16 an hour, well, reasonably, my salary has to go up or my hourly rate has to go up. And they know that. And gym owners know that too. If they're keeping their people above minimum wage, the cost of minimum wage going up shifts where everybody else is going as well. Well, for employees, that's great. For owners, that means that we have to find another way to cover that cost. Again, it's the cost of doing business. And so when minimum wage increases, you have to see a cost increase in things like tuition and private lessons and all those other things in the gym. Because if gym owners are like the average gym is really not making as big of a profit as you probably expect. And so if they're not making this huge profit and now you have inflation, that means things are costing more for the gym, insurance, rent, taxes, all that stuff. Now that's costing more. And then employees are now costing more. And that means that your employer withholding taxes are costing more and your unemployment taxes are costing more and your insurance is now costing more because a lot of times that, like your unemployment insurance is based off of the payroll. Well, now minimum wage went up and that's great, but now all these other things have increased as well. It's definitely not an island when something like that increases. Number 2, mid-season cuts and alternates. So this crazy cheer mom, I'm just saying that because I think it's funny now, making cuts or moving athletes to alternate positions months into the season takes a heavy toll on our kids' mental health. Our athletes dedicate endless hours to give their all, only to be told they're suddenly not enough. It's devastating and confusing. Consistency builds confidence, but sudden roster changes tear that down. These are children still learning, still growing, and deserving stability and communication, not constant uncertainty. Okay, I agree that sudden changes can create a heavy toll on children. I think that applies so far outside of cheer. And I think that in the grand scheme of life, cheer is probably a very small thing that sudden changes in a routine impact a child. I do understand your kids might cry. Your kids might come home at the end of the day and cry because they got taken out of a tumbling pass. And it feels like, as a mom, I'm with you, it feels awful. At the same time, you're in a competitive sport. If the idea that these things are too much for a child and their mental health, then I would say we probably need to reconsider their resiliency and ability to be in a competitive sport. The idea of sports, the concept of it really builds that resiliency in kids. That said, I think most coaches and most owners can do better at the way it's presented. The word that really stuck out to me here was sudden changes. So in my gym, if somebody were pulled from something, they were pulled from tumbling, or they were pulled from a flying position, or their stunt was pulled or whatever, if it's sudden, it's probably because something else that was sudden triggered it. So for example, something else that was sudden could be an athlete breaks her ankle. And now instead of having 12 athletes on a team where I need 3 stunts, I now have 11 athletes on the team where I need 2 stunts. And by the way, I needed every athlete anyway to execute those stunts. Like that sudden ankle breaking then triggers another sudden reaction. I think there's also like a kid can quit. Maybe it's one of your back spots. You've got 3 back spots on a team. One of them quits. And it's really hard because you now either have to teach an athlete how to back spot, you have to pull in an athlete who maybe, hadn't budgeted for that either this season, or you have to readjust stunts and stuff. And so I think a lot of times, like parents think it's sudden, but like they don't see that gym owners, like their options are limited sometimes. Now, that said, a few weeks ago, I did a podcast with Allie Taylor, who works in my gym as a coach, grew up in my gym, and did go at one point to a D1 gym. She said that at that particular gym, if your stunt didn't hit, it got pulled. If you had been tumbling, no problem all season and you missed a pass, it got pulled. And so I can understand if this person is coming from a gym like that, I can understand their level of concern with a sudden instance like that. I would say, if you've ever listened to this podcast, you know that I'm really big on not making those sudden changes because of mistakes. Mistakes are part of growing and they're part of sports. And I also think that we as owners and coaches have a due diligence to kids to allow them to make mistakes and then help push past that. The thing is that I think this particular post is not referencing. Can gym owners and coaches do better in those situations? Yes. But a lot of times, what you guys are seeing as sudden wasn't sudden. You just maybe didn't see the signs of it. So me pulling an athlete who is doing a standing 3 handspring in a level 3 routine, me pulling an athlete who's doing that, like I've probably already had a couple conversations with the parent, but you also have to know if the parents were never at that practice, that athlete might never say, oh yeah, I haven't been throwing it. If the parents are at every practice, they may only be seeing the ones where the athlete is throwing the pass. They may be seeing every warm up where the athlete can throw the pass with nobody else around them, but all of a sudden the music comes on. They are in a close formation with everybody else. They can't see behind them. People are tumbling behind them, and now they can't throw the pass. Now, in situations like that, you absolutely should be talking to the parents as a coach or owner. That said, not every parent is seeing the writing on the wall that's kind of coming. Like if an athlete is not consistently pulling passes in October, we need to start really talking about that. I think what feels sudden for a lot of parents is that they kind of have rose-colored glasses on. So know that I agree. Gym owners and coaches can do better at mitigating that, what feels like trauma at the moment. But having had 3 kids in cheer, what feels like trauma in the moment is a little bit mama bear sometimes coming out and saying, hey, this like wrecked my kids' mental health, when realistically, this was a setback for them. It's a setback that we as parents, now I'm going to speak to you as a parent, that we as parents, like it's our job to teach our kids how to deal with setbacks. They're going to have them their entire lives. And so now is the time for us to teach our kids, hey, this isn't the end for you. It's just a setback. It's maybe you got pulled out of tumbling because, this other kid broke their ankle and now we don't need as many tumblers. Or maybe you got pulled out because you're not hitting it consistently, but like, it's not the end of cheer. It's just a setback. It's temporary. Even if it's going to happen the remainder of the season, that doesn't mean you're not going to be in tumbling next year. So the other thing here is that when we are saying a kid feels like they're not enough, I really want to also reframe this. Guys, I've had 3 kids in cheer, and I can tell you our kids do not want to disappoint us as parents. And so a lot of times the way they are framing something is different than the reality. You have to recognize also that what a child will say around their parents, like, I will work this hard this season to be on this team. I want to be in the tumbling section and I will get those passes and I will do XYZ to make this team. Well, tryout Susie is a little bit different than October Susie, because by October, Susie knows she made the team. By October, Susie knows she might be in the tumbling pass and it's pretty hard to take her out now. By October, Susie doesn't have the same motivation she had back in May during tryouts. And I'm going to tell you, February Susie is a whole different ballgame altogether. And so we have to remember that whether we're talking about young children in elementary school or middle school, even our high schoolers, sometimes they can't see 5 feet in front of them. They're looking at the here and now in this situation in May, I will do whatever it takes to be in that pass and make that team. But by October, Susie looks different. And so I think parents need to recognize that as well. We need to recognize that progress doesn't happen overnight, and you can't will something to happen. You can set people up for success. You can do the workouts to become strong enough and flexible enough. You can do the private lessons, but every athlete is different, and you can't will somebody to get their back handspring. You can't will them to not be fearful. You can do reps, you can do drills, you can do private lessons, you can do all these things, but timing is not dictated by the desire of the athlete. It's often dictated by the limitations of the body and the brain. All right, you guys, so we are actually going to stop there for right now because this is a 2-part episode. This was a really long post, but it was really good because it got us thinking and talking about things that need to happen in the industry. So make sure you join me next week for part 2 of this episode where I reply to this crazy cheer mom. And with that, you guys, thank you for joining me on this episode of the Full Out Cheer podcast. I will see you next week for part 2.